I think what's interesting is like what in crypto can help the world. And the reputation around crypto is, flipping NFTs and getting rich quick and kind of moon boys, which are like YouTubers who just like pump things up and get people excited about something that has no value. And now we're trying to figure out, well, how can we in this industry actually add value to society that's actually helpful and that's not just speculation?
Welcome to Season 2 of From the Blockchain, where we speak to today's most innovative entrepreneurs and thought leaders to impact the true potential of smart contract technology, Web3, and the digital frontier. I'm your host, Ashley Smith from Fame Lady Squad, and I'm thrilled to have you join today's top-tier community of forward-thinking trailblazers. We're here to foster a culture of idea sharing, creativity, and innovation that transcends industries, revolutionizes business, and drives meaningful conversation. If you're ready to forge a path to becoming a thought leader in your industry or organization, think of this podcast as your compass. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and be part of our amazing community. Oh, and please note that this podcast is for informational entertainment purposes only and should not be considered financial or investment advice. Alrighty, everybody, enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to From the Blockchain. I am so excited to be in studio again today in Vancouver with my friend, Jarrett Vaughan. Before we get to chatting, Jarrett, I do want to give a little introduction to you to give the audience some background about who you are and what you do. Jarrett is an adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia Sauder School of Business. At UBC, he teaches crypto, NFTs, blockchain technology, and marketing. He provides a solid education-based approach in his courses. He is also the co-founder of digibuddies.xyz, digital collectibles with a purpose. Jarrett worked in management in the luxury hotel business for 10 years, most recently at Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts. He also founded a real estate investment company in 2006, which he still owns and operates today. In 2017, he began to invest in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. This introduction to Web3 has allowed Jarrett to now teach and speak on topics related to NFTs, crypto, and Web3. He is currently launching an NFT project for social good based on art that his 7-year-old daughter created while she was recovering from her 16th surgery. Jarrett is married with 3 children and is a musician, urban farmer, and is a champion for children with disabilities. In his spare time, he can be found tending to his honeybees and studying libertarian economics. No surprise. Jarrett, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here and putting up with me as I read your bio aloud right in front of you.
I mean, that's an awkward experience.
I know. I want everyone to know the depths of your expertise and the range of things that you've been involved in. We met a couple years ago, I think, because of some of the NFT stuff that you were doing, and it was just interesting to, first of all, know that you were teaching things related to NFTs and cryptocurrencies at a school like the Sauder School of Business, which for those who aren't from the Vancouver region, they should know it's a very important professional business school here in the west side of Canada. It also happens to be where I got my real estate license. That's the only place, if you're in British Columbia, how you take the education with them, and that's how you get licensed. But anyhow, how are you doing? How's it going? Let's slow it down.
Well, I think, I'm doing great. We're at the end of summer, and my life in the summertime is surrounded by playing beach volleyball and, gardening and tending to my bees and then thinking about what is crypto going to look like this fall?
Yeah.
And what is crypto going to look like at Bitcoin halving next year and things like that. So I'm doing as good as the crypto markets are doing.
So what does that mean for you today?
I mean, it's better now than in January, so.
Yes, 100%. I would love to quickly touch on the education piece. I would like to know what these cycles mean for education interest. Frankly, I was surprised to even know as early on as you were involved in teaching that the schools were kind of willing to go there. Yeah,
so I think the thing to understand about university education when it comes to Web3 is that there is a lot of hesitancy. And so the courses are not credited courses at this point, but they are taught through the university, which is really great, which, and university's got a pretty vibrant blockchain community, which is helpful to this. It's a group at the university, which is a kind of an interdisciplinary group of professors that come together from different departments to form what's called blockchain at UBC. And that, brings in computer programmers and library records keeping people and all kinds of different departments to try to understand how the technology can be applied. And then I kind of look at this and thinking, well, how do we engage with people who are not technical? And how do we provide an educational foundation for them to understand, like, what is a wallet and how to use a seed phrase and what is cold storage and, what's an NFT and what's blockchain and all this kind of stuff. And so that was the foundation of building these 4 courses, 2 courses on blockchain, 1 course on NFTs and 1 on crypto. And it was very cool. But the success of these courses is very much related to the price of the crypto market.
Yeah.
When things are going well, like many things in our industry, there's just an enormous amount of people that want to learn. But when things are going bad, people step away. And it really, unfortunately, should be the opposite. Now is the time to really dig in and learn so that when we have a big bull run, you're ready to go.
I'd love to know, is there a range in terms of demographics when it comes to your students?
Yeah, middle-aged men. Yeah. Dads. They're, I would say the classic student has a high school son who is into crypto, and their dad wants to invest, is a bit conscious of the risk. He probably has some mutual funds and he's got a investment broker of some type, but now he's got to do this on his own and he's a bit hesitant, but he can afford some risk. So he's tech savvy enough, he can use his iPad and, but he's not a programmer. So like seed phrases and things like that really confuse him. And that is the classic type of guy that's in my course. And there is diversity in the course, but that is so many of the students.
Right.
Middle-aged men.
Yeah. Oh, that's so encouraging. I tease. I mean, clearly one of the goals of this podcast is to reach a broad audience and introduce the tech to a wide range of people to understand what the opportunities are. Maybe we can just touch on that a little bit. You've talked to a lot of people. Jarrett also has a podcast called the Web3 Prof. Everyone should subscribe and listen in. And there's especially, you're going to get a lot more crypto related stuff in his show than you will on mine. So if that's an area of interest, definitely want to check that out because I think you speak in a language people are able to understand and talk to many really interesting guests. But why don't we take a little bit of a look back over the last couple of years, and what are you thinking about now as we're entering kind of the second half of 2023?
As far as like where the market is?
Well, not so much market and market predictions, but more where are you focused? Like what things are you thinking about today? Perhaps besides just speculative market cycles. Yeah.
I think what's interesting is like what in crypto can help the world.
Yes.
A lot of what we've seen in the past is, and the reputation around crypto is, flipping NFTs and getting rich quick and kind of moon boys, which are like YouTubers who just like pump things up and get people excited about something that has no value. And now we're trying to figure out, well, how can we in this industry actually add value to society that's actually helpful and that's not just speculation. There is value in speculation, and we see speculation happen in all kinds of industries all the time, and there is some value there, but that can't be the greatest value add to society. And so one of the reasons we started DigiBuddies was trying to think, well, how can we take a cool technology like NFTs and how can we leverage that to do something good for society? And I think that's where we see lots of growth. All kinds of interesting terms come out now where we see these ideas of like refi, which is like the financing of regenerative financial projects as far as like regenerating land, like forests and farming and, water filtration and doing things like that on the blockchain. And we see people fundraising for nonprofits in kind of NFT fundraising ways. And I think that's really interesting. And I think those type of movements will allow the public or the mass market to appreciate the value in the Web3 space instead of right now, like maybe mocking it or thinking it's just for like college boys who just like want to get rich quick. And that's the reputation we hold. So I think that like crypto for good is an important movement that we have. And I think one thing we see in crypto is full of capitalists, and capitalists have a bad reputation, especially when you get into like the type of capitalist that I am, where we're just really fundamentally not really supportive of what the government does. We want freedom in so many different ways. And we need to make sure that we don't overstep our boundaries and what's realistic and what people expect of us to show that, you know, we still believe in helping people and doing really good things.
So why don't we talk a bit about DigiBuddies, and then perhaps we can unpack some of that a little bit more. Yeah.
So DigiBuddies was started based on artwork that my daughter created. So my daughter was 7 years old at the time, which was last year, and she was going into her 16th surgery. So she's now had 18 surgeries. She was born paralyzed from the waist down with all kinds of physical complexities with her body, scoliosis and torticollis. And I can rattle off all these things that she has. Basically, her body's kind of all twisted. And but she has no cognitive disability. So she's a typical little 8-year-old girl. She's actually super smart and she's super adventurous, which is challenging because being in a wheelchair and being adventurous don't go together. Typically, if you're in a wheelchair, the ideal situation is you stay home and watch movies and kind of not do things that adventurous people do. And so the challenge for my wife and I has always been, how do we get equipment to get her to be able to go on the sand or go skiing or play hockey or do all the things she wants to do? And so we spend a lot of time doing that. So she has a sit ski. She's got an electric 4-wheeled bike that goes on the sand. She has a hand trike. She's got a sledge for para hockey. She's got all this cool stuff, and she's super active. But during this very intense surgery last year, they put her in what's called halo traction. And halo traction is when they put a halo, a metal ring, around your skull, and they drill it into your skull. And so she had all these screws in, and with that halo, they hung her from that halo in her wheelchair. So they built a pulley system on her wheelchair, and they suspended her so she was hovering above the seat of her wheelchair for 8 weeks. So for 8 weeks, she was like that every day, all day. And at nighttime, she would sleep on an angled bed with another pulley pulling on her head. And it's kind of gruesome and pretty intense. It looks like a medieval torture device. But the idea was that they needed to manually straighten her spine with traction so that she could then have rods installed in her spine to keep her straight, because she was so twisted that it was cutting into her heart and lungs. So we went through this process, and one thing with the halo traction surgery, she can't look up or down. She can only look side to side. And we're figuring out how we're going to be in the hospital for 3 months total. We've got 2 other boys. How are we going to keep her entertained? So we got her an iPad with a pen and put it on a stand in front of her and just got her to draw as one of the many activities to keep her entertained. And she started drawing these little characters that were cute. She's not a gifted artist. She's just like any kid. And we thought, wonder if there's something we can do with these. And then my son is on a hockey team, and one of the moms on the hockey team, she's kind of interested in NFTs. And she said, hey, you should sell those. And I was like, nobody wants this. And she's like, no, you should look. And she showed me all these kids that were out there, namely one girl who sold a project called Long Neckies. I can't remember her name. Nyla, exactly. And she said, look at this. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So this kind of formed this idea around DigiBuddies. So what we did is we took these little characters. She created 5 of them. We partnered with an artist named Alana Simone, who is from Rhode Island in the United States. She created a project called Black Girls NFT. We partnered with her, and she kind of developed the art. So she took sailors' drawings and she kind of standardized them. She made them consistent with each other so they could have arms and legs and things like that. And then my kids created the name DigiBuddies, and they created name characters, and they created characteristics and features, rarities, all kinds of things about the characters. We then created 750 digital trading cards, each with different levels of rarities. But what's cool about them is every character has a disability, and every character has a superpower. So the characters are in power wheelchairs, manual wheelchair, sit ski, ice hockey sledge, and a hand trike, all devices that Sailor uses. And each one of them has a superpower, like a helicopter pops out of their head, or they can shoot lasers or things like that. And these are the superpowers that my kids thought up. And the idea is that we sell these digital trading cards to a community of like-minded people who are interested in doing good for the world, raising awareness around people with disabilities, teaching kids that everybody's different. And ultimately, we're donating 20% of all the revenue to BC Children's Hospital, the place where Sauder has had all 18 of her surgeries. And the idea here is to really kind of raise awareness. But really what we want to do is we want to teach kids to have compassion and empathy, to show them that they can be different and that's okay, and that everybody's different. Sauder has the benefit of having a very visible disability. And we want to leverage that because it's easy to relate to. People can easily relate to someone in a wheelchair. You know it's difficult. But there are lots of people that have disabilities that are not as visible. And we hope in time that we can add to this generation of trading cards features around maybe kids who have autism or other things that are much more complicated to communicate. But we hope that this gets traction so that we can have NFTs for good, that we can do good things.
Wow. Well, that's a lot. I mean, your family's obviously gone through a lot, and your daughter sounds like not only a brave young girl, but also much more bold and talented than me, given all of the things that she's getting herself into with her adventurous spirit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, good for her for leaning in and giving this a try. And I would, first of all, wish you success. Why don't you tell us, is there anything we can know about the project? Because I believe this episode might launch around the time it's launched.
Yeah, so we're going to launch on September 26th. The way you can purchase DigiBuddies is by going to our website, digibuddies.xyz. And there you'll be able to use a Dapper wallet. So we built this on Flow blockchain, which is actually a blockchain here from Vancouver. And we built this on Flow blockchain because on Dapper wallet, you can pay for your digital trading card with a credit card. You just create an account with a username and a password. You don't need anything complicated. And with your credit card, you can purchase a DigiBuddy and hold it in your wallet. And then you'll also be able to sell them on a secondary marketplace or buy others on the secondary marketplace as well. So digibuddies.xyz on September 26th is when they'll be released. And we have made it as user-friendly as possible for the non-crypto person.
Yes.
Because we want to open up the space to people who aren't crypto native, and we've intentionally designed this project with my wife and my daughter, and with Alana Simone, our artist that we work with, to have this as female oriented as possible as well, trying to bring diversity into the marketplace as well. Because as you said, all of my students are middle-aged men, as you would expect, and we're trying to somehow break through that.
And we do live in a very diverse part of the world as well, so you're getting like an interesting little niche there.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can touch, just for the sake of our audience. I will make sure that all of this is linked in the show notes. But you know, you and I started chatting a bit about this. So it feels like longer than a year ago now. And the landscape has certainly evolved. The market has evolved, but also the Web3 technology and options to build on. And I should mention for our audience as well, you know, if you're new to all of this, the Dapper's Flow blockchain, I frankly don't know as much about it as I should, but it's not just because they happen to be next door. These are like world-class global leaders in Web3 tech, right? So why, without getting into the nitty-gritty details, why would you have considered doing something on blockchain like Flow? Like, what were the advantages? What were your considerations?
So I personally spend a lot of time in the Solana ecosystem, trading crypto and understanding projects. I don't know a ton about Ethereum. And so when I looked at this, I thought maybe we'd build on Solana because there's a lot of benefits to that. And then I started to really think about Flow. Now, one thing I really liked about Flow was, number one, I know some of the co-founders. And that was really helpful to me because in the world of crypto, there's so much mystery. So many people that you are acting as someone that they're not, and you might have some experience with this. And so I can trust these people. Dee Shirley, the Chief Technology Officer of Dapper Labs and co-founder Flow Blockchain, he invented the term NFT. They created CryptoKitties, which was really the first large NFT project to gain traction. They really are like the kind of like the fathers of the industry we're working in. And so when I was looking at blockchains, I thought, okay, I know these people. I trust these people. I've been to their office. I've had them on my podcast, many of them. And I thought, this is great. And what's cool about Flow is it's very user-friendly. It has a very low environmental impact. It's fast. It's very cheap to use. And the credit card integration was important. And there's a lot of big names in Flow blockchain. For example, the NFL, the NBA, UFC, lots of Disney projects, Dr. Seuss. These are just off the top of my head that I can think of right now. Lots of major brands are using Flow blockchain. And one of the biggest projects in the world, which is called Doodles, moved to Flow blockchain, I want to say maybe a year ago. And one feature we're hoping to build into our project is an idea that is referred to as composability. And composability means that we hope that you'll be able to take wearables or NFT assets that are clothing, hats, sunglasses, or whatever from other projects and layer them on our characters so you can dress them up in different features. And we designed our characters with the same dimensions as Doodle characters so that you could take your Doodles wearables and put them on our DigiBuddies. Composability is a feature of Web3 that people talk about all the time, but that doesn't really happen much right now because we're all trying to figure out how to do it. So we hope that composability with DigiBuddies and Doodles hopefully will work. This is something we're going to start working on after we launch, probably later in the winter of this year, to see if we can actually figure it out. But it's one of the goals that we have.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. And full disclosure, I am a Doodles holder. I probably mentioned this in a recent show, but I bought the dip because I had wanted to get in. I thought it was so neat. And then I could have waited a little longer. But that's okay.
You bought the pre-dip.
I bought the pre-dip dip. Anyways, not financial advice, everybody. But I do think that's really neat. And I think what I feel like I'm hearing you say is you're creating an environment, at least your vision right now is it's something that I'm assuming kids are going to be able to like participate in. And it's almost, I know it's not the feature and highlight of what you're working on, but I'm trying to give our audience an understanding of like how people might interact with some of these things. And so I almost think of it as like dress up dolls and like you get to play.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I think that's important. And so we hope that in due time we can create a game, like a video game, where we can teach kids to do good societal things with the DigiBuddy characters that you have. And so that is hopefully a utility that we can offer in due time. The wearables hopefully is a utility we can offer. And then some of the utility or the usability of this is kind of the same way in which I collected hockey cards as a kid. Just things I like to look at and I like to engage with and check out because people love to collect stuff. Collectors are such a big part of society, and so many people collect things. And the collectability of this is hopefully kind of a usability of it. And then the doing something good as well.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I think when we had our very early conversations, you might not have necessarily known how to go about, or you were still exploring how to go about donations related to this. And I know that the Children's Hospital was very important to you. Without getting into any details that might not be appropriate for public consumption, like what does that look like? Is this something that you're taking credit card, but it's on chain? Cryptocurrency is sort of involved, and then you're donating to a very important establishment. What kind of conversation is going on there? Because I think for folks who are involved in charitable work, this might be very interesting for them.
So there's an organization called the Giving Block. And here's the ideal situation, and it's not the situation we're in. The ideal situation is that you buy a DigiBuddy. We partner with an organization like the Giving Block. A percentage, so 20% in our case, of our revenue would then be automatically on-chain transferred to the Giving Block. The Giving Block then does one of two things: sends it to the wallet of the nonprofit that you're donating to, or converts it to dollars and sends it to their bank account. And the great thing about this concept is that it's all on-chain, so no one can question whether I'm actually donating or not, because this is a risk for the buyer. Do they trust my family to actually give the 20%? And blockchain technology one of the biggest issues it addresses is an issue of trust, right? We have intermediaries in society because we don't trust each other. So we need banks to help us transact between two people, for example. And so blockchain addresses the issue of trust. And the Giving Block is a great organization that kind of helps transact between a nonprofit and a project like ours. In order to do that, you need to have buy-in from the nonprofit.
Yeah.
And at this point, BC Children's Hospital wasn't ready to accept crypto donations, which is totally fine and totally understandable. And so we'll actually be donating dollars, from our bank account when things get transferred into to the hospital. And people will have to trust that we're going to do that. And then we'll show evidence, and they'll have to trust that our screenshots are accurate and that we haven't photoshopped them, right?
Yeah.
But we could do that because we aren't going to be doing it on the blockchain. And so I think once we get into a place where more and more organizations will accept crypto, like there are some big organizations that work with the Giving Block, big hospitals and things like that in the States that have started to do this. And once this kind of catches on, especially when we move to another bull market, it'll be much easier for projects like ours to do this because I think it's such an ideal situation.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that my wife is part of, she's on the board of a really large nonprofit that does surgeries on children in Africa who have disabilities. And the challenge is that their organization and many others face is that a lot of boomers are their donors and they're dying. They're old, they're passing away. And if it's not in their estate to donate, they are missing big donors now. And we, in our generation, aren't donating like they did. And they've been loyal donors for 30 years or 50 years, and now they're dying. And so these organizations are trying to figure out how do they keep raising money. And so I think something that we think about is like, well, how can we get people who are crypto rich or into crypto to donate and actually use some of their wealth to do something better in the world? And so, we hope to create a model where we can show other organizations like, hey, imagine if the hospitals who have hundreds or thousands of kids sitting in hospital beds, imagine if they said to parents, hey, here's a cool little program you can use. Your kid can draw stuff. We've developed a little program. They can upload these drawings as NFTs to this little program, and you can actually raise money for your own family. And you can choose to donate some of it to the hospital. But if organizations like this started to empower these kids who are sitting in hospital beds, bored, but often able to do stuff, to raise money even for their own families and their own causes without putting pressure on them, I think it's an interesting idea, because even in Canada, where we have a remarkable medical system, there's an enormous financial burden on families when they spend months in hospitals. It's all paid for, but you can't work. You got to buy food. You got to pay for parking, hotels, all this stuff. And so trying to figure out how we can, even, is there a possibility around that?
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I know that some conversations I've been in on where very significant global organizations that most people would know were interested in maybe doing something and then kind of shied away. And that's just the way that things are, I think, right now. But I do believe there will be a shift as well. And I just keep thinking, I'm hoping people are getting ideas sparked as they listen to you talking. I don't know about you, but I've been on committees related to charitable events, which I've realized, don't call me, I'm the worst. Like, I'm the worst person. I'm not great at fundraising for that stuff. I'm not great at event planning. I'm happy to support and all that stuff. But it's so much work that goes into these things. And how interesting would it be to have a gala event and your ticket's an NFT and the money automatically goes and you see it. And you have a collectible or some proof of your support, which is great. I just think it adds an interesting layer of, I think it could add loyalty, but also the transparency factor, I think, is something that a lot of people want to, have. So anyhow, I hope people take something of that, maybe connect with Jarrett and work on what can be done. Because a lot of this feels still like what can be done, but isn't being done yet.
And I think that's the thing. Like, we're in the early days of this, and DigiBuddies hopefully is a little part of moving the needle a little bit on this, and somebody else will take the reins and bring it even farther. And I think there are lots of organizations out there that are trying to make things more user-friendly. Like Ethos, who you've had in your podcast with Matthias, are doing really great things to try to figure out how corporations can get involved in Web3 in a really simple, user-friendly way. And seeing these organizations come out are great. But there is still the reputation that crypto's scammy, and some of it is.
Yeah.
You know, and that those barriers need to be broken before a lot of this kind of trust can be enabled in the industry.
I want to talk to you about some real estate stuff, but before we get there, you've had a lot of conversations with interesting people on your show. You've got to meet so many folks because of what you're working on, and of course, because of your teaching career. Is there anything is there a favorite episode of your podcast or a favorite anecdote or just something that surprised you with what the technology can enable?
Yeah. Well, my favorite episode was when I interviewed you, obviously.
Oh, I will put that in the show notes.
Web3 Prof podcast / Ashley Smith or something. I don't know.
I'll find it.
I think I had a podcast episode with a guy named Jeff Booth. And Jeff Booth is kind of a global crypto guy when it comes to economics.
Yeah.
And he has a strong ethos and belief around inflation and opinions around the dollar and how the world's going to end up. And I found my conversation with him to be really interesting. He's a very smart man. He sold like over 500,000 copies of his book on this topic, which is called The Price of Tomorrow. And I'm really interested. I really am passionate about economics. And it was really, in like 2002 when I was in college, I started to learn about like money and the money system and things like that. And it took me so long to get to Bitcoin, but if it had been invented and if I knew about it then, it would have solved so many of the challenges that I was trying to work through. And then, learning about Jeff Booth and chatting with him is great because I think we're in a dark economic place, and I see hope or light at the end of the tunnel with some of the solutions that Bitcoin in particular offers. So I loved chatting with him about that and the complexity, the simplicity in which he breaks stuff down on a very complex topic, I think is really inspiring and helpful.
I feel like I'm a bit, I shy away from crypto. I don't I bought crypto in order to buy NFTs, and I watched some things and I should have bought some stuff and should have sold some stuff. But I think that I still come from this background of like, I don't feel well equipped to make judgment on what I should do. So the technology was tough, but I got through it.
Right.
But the trying to participate in that monetary system, if you want to call it that, still felt very daunting to me.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on if someone's looking at, and of course not financial advice, everybody, but if somebody's wanting to learn about crypto today during a bear market and not necessarily put money in, but figure out like, how do I learn about what might matter?
Yeah.
What do they do?
Yeah. And I think that's why I started teaching crypto.
Yeah.
Is because I found that it's very difficult to figure out how you learn because there isn't a system in place that's recognized that said this person knows what they're talking about. Because you can't really go to university and learn about this stuff. There's very little out there. And so how do you know who to trust? Because you got a lot of YouTubers, which is the primary way you learn about this stuff, that you don't know who they are, and you don't know if they're just telling you to buy this because they're an owner of it, which is often the case. And so having unbiased education is important. And then when I started investing in real estate in 2006, I was fortunate enough to come across an organization that really helped me learn about real estate from an unbiased perspective. And they never sold a piece of real estate. And that was really important. And so when I started teaching crypto, I was like, I want to teach this from an unbiased perspective, just teach about the technology, teach about the fundamentals and the basics so that you can learn this, because I had a hard time figuring out what to trust as well. Now, I think there's some really amazing podcasts out there, and I think that's a really solid way to work, to learn. But what I think is more important than understanding crypto is more understanding the money system, because I think that's the reason it exists. The reason that Bitcoin exists is because of the way our money system is currently built. And I was trying to figure this out even for my kids, like how can I teach them? And I found this book about these kids who had a lemonade stand and they started to accept Bitcoin at their lemonade stand. And they walked through the process of, first they accepted grass clippings as payment. And then they realized everybody could get grass clippings. So it wasn't a hard enough money, meaning it was too easy to produce. Then they accepted seashells. Well, seashells are easy to find. And then they accepted glass beads, and well, anybody can get glass beads. And then they accepted dollars. And then as they kind of went through the process, they realized, well, they needed to accept a currency at their lemonade stand that there was a limited supply of, because as they accepted different currencies, if the currency kept being reproduced, like we do with the dollar, we print money, the value of their income kept decreasing. And this little storybook like really broke it down so simply on why Bitcoin matters. And I think those kind of simple anecdotes are helpful to understand these types of things. And there's actually more and more kids' books coming out about this. And I think that's actually a really great way to learn.
Cool. And if folks are interested in the courses that you teach, are you actively enrolling, or what does that look like on a seasonal?
Yeah. So I'm going to be teaching my next set of courses in January. And so you can check out the web3prof.com and enroll in courses there. And the courses are all live on Zoom.
Okay.
And so there's no pre-recorded material. It's all having conversations, and it's very much a conversational course to answer questions. And I even have office hours where I sit with individuals and walk them through the steps of maybe creating a wallet or whatever the hang up is.
Cool. I feel like we could dive a lot deeper into some of that stuff, but I want to talk about real estate. You clearly, have been involved in real estate as an investor for a long time. You have your finger on the pulse with what's going on with this technology and the cryptocurrencies. You and I are actually speaking together at a conference here in Vancouver. I'll do a little plug, the Pacific West Conference, which is October 3rd through the 5th. And we're going to be speaking about sort of digital transformation, what it might mean for realtors, real estate, the sector, home buyers, home sellers, all of that. By the way, I might be getting a discount code from the conference. It's mainly geared towards realtors, but if I have that when this show comes out, I'll put that in the show notes as well. So we haven't fully planned out what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to do it right now.
We're going to do a little preview here. But what is top of mind for you when you think about real estate and the intersection of blockchain technology, cryptocurrency, smart contracts? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about those two worlds?
Yeah, what I think about initially is like the reducing of the barrier to entry, because it's hard to buy real estate, mainly because you need a lot of money and really good credit. And so whether it's your personal residence or whether it's an investment property, it's really challenging. It's often the life goal of someone to buy a house. And the reason it's a life goal often is because it's a hard thing to do. If it was an easy thing to do, it'd be like your annual goal to buy a house, but that's unrealistic. And so when I started buying residential investment properties, I would raise money. I would go to friends and friends of friends and be like, hey, I want to buy this condo or this townhouse or this duplex. If you put in some money, you can have partial ownership. You can make money from 3 different ways: the increase in value, the reduction in the mortgage from the rental payments, and the cash flow from the property. But it's a lot of money. I couldn't take people who had $100 to invest in my one little property I was going to buy. And so what's most exciting to me is that people are figuring out a way to fractionalize real estate, to take maybe $100 investment and allow someone to put that money into a piece of real estate and have that done on chain. So it's all open. People can see what's happening and take ownership in a little piece of property somewhere. Take ownership of a small piece of a property somewhere and benefit from those 3 things I just listed, from the value increase, from the mortgage reduction or the debt pay down, and the cash flow of that property.
We did have Retium on the show, and so I'll put a link in the show notes. That show will have been released, and they talk a lot about fractionalized ownership in that kind of scenario where you can put $100 in. There's usually maximums that are still quite limiting.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit of a challenge, like $1,000 maximum.
Yeah. And so I'd be very interested to see where this falls, at what point, where there might be opportunities to get more invested. I like the idea of being able to participate in a small way, but it's kind of that middle of the road, like wanting to really participate in something, but you not being capable of getting into that $1 million, 1-bedroom apartment. And so, I'm curious to see where that lands. And I know that there are some opportunities for private like families and stuff to play with some of this technology and perhaps create efficiencies. But I think it's just still so new. And so that's the type of thing I'm going to be trying to keep my eye on. I know I've seen properties being sold as NFTs, and it happened like 2 years ago, and I've recently seen it in my news feed again, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
That's weird. Have you seen anything of that nature?
No.
So I still think that's very novel, and I'm not sure if it's the thing. But the one thing that I've been thinking about is data. I am going to be speaking to someone about MLS system and a decentralized data system.
Okay.
So that'll be interesting to see if that flies. But I think about like in British Columbia anyways, strata corporations and strata documentation and like I'm sure there's, homeowner association equivalents in different parts of the world, but where, if you're buying or selling a property, you need to get all of this documentation. It's usually somewhere in the cloud. Sometimes it's still in a filing cabinet.
Right. Yeah.
You have to pay up the yin yang for it. You aren't always 100% that you've received the full spectrum of documentation, or if there's been any weird alteration, or have you received the most recent and up-to-date version of whatever document you need to do due diligence. And I know it's something that realtors complain of because it's like 10 days is the standard order, or like 4 days is still a rush, like in a housing market where things are moving in 2 seconds.
You don't have time for that.
Like, how does and you're paying like crazy. And so it just seems like blockchain technology provides a solution there, but I haven't seen it being done. And that's just an example of the type of thing.
There's an interesting woman that maybe you should talk to on the podcast. Her name is Dr. Victoria Lemieux. She lives here in Vancouver. She's a records keeping professor and she's a blockchain expert.
Okay.
And this is the kind of thing she's super passionate about. She's most particularly passionate about health care records.
Right.
Because it's the same kind of problem.
Yeah.
My daughter's, we've seen parts of her records and the pile of documents is at least this big, like 12 inches thick or more. And every time she goes to the hospital, a person needs to go to another building on the property with a cart to get her files and roll it back to the hospital so that they could look at it. It was only a few months ago that they moved to electronic record keeping. And this is in one of the top 4 children's hospitals in the entire world. And so when you look at record keeping, you think there's obviously a better way to do this. And electronic records is one way, but involving blockchain for accuracy and authenticity and understanding, the originality of the document, it becomes really important.
And I think as we start seeing more chains being developed that aren't like heavy crypto chains, if that makes sense. This is my very lay person way of describing it, but like you wouldn't, I'm assuming, keep records like on Ethereum where to do anything, to interact with it, there's like a high cost.
Yeah.
But now we're starting to see these blockchains that can enable activity, I guess. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, for sure. Because like if you look at like Aptos or Sui or Solana, these transactions are costing fractions of a penny to interact, and that is really affordable. It's even so much to the point that just this week, Visa announced that it's going to be working with Solana for payment processing because it's so cheap, and that kind of stuff is exciting because you need that cost efficiency because you can't pay $20 or $50 every time you want to interact with the blockchain. One reason I don't really love Ethereum so much. And so, I think the point you make is important, that there has to be other efficiencies that will come about for sure.
See, this is where now we sort of like shoot the shit and talk about ideas. And I really appreciate it because I think there's so much room for innovation, and it's, I think, trying to tie together the people who know how to make the technology work with the people who are within the industries who better understand the problems and also understand the frameworks that they're working in and like the regulatory challenges and whatever, right? Like there's a lot of opportunity here, but there's still time needed to connect the dots.
So there's this one organization that I've been looking at that I think is kind of interesting. It's the idea that you can speculate on the value of the average real estate price in a city. So they have tracked the price of Paris and New York and San Francisco, like maybe 20 cities around the world, and you can leverage 10 times your money to speculate on whether New York City is going to get more expensive or not, which is kind of interesting because right now, in British Columbia, for you to invest in real estate, you need to put 20% down. So you can kind of 5 times leverage your investment, right? And you can think, okay, I'm going to buy this rental property, and hopefully in 5 years it has gone up whatever, 50% or 100% or something like that. And so they're kind of taking that concept, and now you don't have to get pre-approved for a mortgage. You're not looking at just one property, but the average price of a city, which might be good for some investors, and trying to break the idea of real estate investing into kind of a different type of speculation. Now, when buying rental properties, hopefully you're not buying it based on speculation. Hopefully you're buying it for cash flow and also debt pay down, because speculators get caught sometimes. But this is kind of another area that maybe you want to invest $100 in the New York rental market, and now you kind of can do that in kind of some interesting, strange way.
And by the way, can you cash flow in Vancouver on a residential property? Like
not since I've been alive. I want to tell you the name of the organization because I wrote it down because I thought it was kind of cool. They're called Parcel.
Okay.
PARCL.co.
Awesome.
I don't know anybody that works there, and I'm not promoting them at all. I'm not getting paid to say this or anything like that. I think it's just kind of a cool idea.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think the intersection of all of this stuff with artificial intelligence and kind of data learning, all that is going to be so interesting. And so for anyone who listened to this show wanting to think about real estate, there's just so much going on in the environment that I think will likely impact the way business is done and the opportunities that people might have. And the status quo is here, but it's not here for much longer.
Right.
I think. Yeah.
Do you think the property deed, the land record, do you think there's a future in that becoming an NFT and that being tracked on the blockchain?
I definitely believe so. I don't believe that would happen. And this is purely just my, random opinion, but I don't think we'd expect to see something like that in British Columbia. I think that something like that is at least not anytime soon. We would not be the first.
Right.
For a variety of reasons, including that our title system here is very sound compared to most places in the world. Partly because we're not only a young country, but a young province. And a lot of the record keeping's been pretty good, and fraud is very, very, very rare. Yep. So the why isn't as strong, other than looking at creating efficiencies and seeing the benefits. Yep. There's not a lot poking at this needing to be done here. However, I think internationally in particular, like where they have poor title or deed record keeping would be very interesting to see. I think we take for granted the ease of and trust that we actually do generally have. There is still fraud. I know in East Coast Canada and many places around the United States, there's a lot of fraud, mortgage fraud, and like people selling properties that they don't own. Like that's a big deal, right? Yeah. And then there's other things related to deeds and titles that are not necessarily just about ownership, but about easements, rights of ways, like, a mortgage being registered and it being there and knowing it's there, and who gets the benefit of if someone defaults, where does money go first, and it just being triggered. Like that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. But I do think in these more vulnerable areas where there's not a lot of trust in government and their, say, government agencies, that it seems like such an obvious thing. Yeah. But they, of course, would need the money or private companies, I don't know, to go in and figure out how to make this work.
Yeah, like I totally agree with you. I think in developing countries, there's a huge opportunity where sometimes governments get overthrown and you got a new leader and they confiscate property from the people that supported the previous party. I have friends, that are Nicaraguan that had to leave the country because a new guy came in and took over, and they have property there and they're not sure that they will ever get to keep it. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen, right? But if there was accurate record keeping, and in due time, when that government gets overthrown, to go back to the original record would be quite easy with having things registered on the blockchain. And that's and I think that's so foreign to us that when we look at that living here and all over North America, we think, there's no use case for blockchain and record keeping for land title. But most of the world there is a use case for that. And sometimes we need to get out of our mindset of what it's like here and look at, well, there's a lot of places that could benefit from something like that.
Yeah, there's a variety of things. I think of like leases, even, for example. So if you are renting a property, I think it could add a lot of, it could help resolve a lot of disputes that can come up. For example, the landlord said the document was signed this way. The tenant said this was the way it was, signed, and whose version of the contract is accurate. Like there's a lot of things of that nature. There was something else I had in my mind here that just popped out. I might cut this out. We'll see. I wanted to get to it. Now I'm mad I never do this on the show. Anyhow, there's a variety of things I think that we don't think about that this technology can help enable. It's just a matter of the will of like who's gonna set up the infrastructure, who's gonna do it, who's gonna build it. And in those cases, that's the other thing is I think you really need adoption. Otherwise, it doesn't matter so much. Yeah. Like if you're a one-off, if you're the 5% even that's doing it, doesn't matter. I don't know.
Yeah, there needs to be like a national standard for something like that, or a regional standard for something like that to happen. But of course, it is like anything. But it takes someone who has a large tolerance of risk. Like the president of El Salvador, making Bitcoin and a federal currency. That's the type of risk a leader needs to be able to take in order to do something like this. And there needs to be enough corruption in the country and enough people who hate the corruption to say, okay, we're willing to try something else out because the status quo is so bad, anything is going to be better than this.
Yeah, for sure. And and this is not a corruption thing. I remembered my thing. So I'll keep my little fumble in the show. Makes my job easier.
And we see the real you. This is authentic.
Oh my goodness. So this is the thing I was going to mention before. It's about efficiency. And, it may not be a strong enough push for folks today, but it still blows my mind that when you're dealing with a real estate transaction, it's not instant. Like someone basically purchases the property, the funds go in, and then the title gets transferred. Like it's not a thing that happens simultaneously. And it's something that often requires a day or more apart just to make sure there aren't any like issues with the money being transferred. Like there should be technology protocols that can be put in place to say, hey, if A happens, B happens, then C happens. And there's a lot of just unnecessary headaches that come up that can cause real ripple effect challenges for, people needing to move out of their home. They can't move into their next one or vice versa. And these sort of technologies can help prevent some of those things. And it would also allow, like I, as a realtor, would not do transactions on a Friday, as an example. Worst case scenario, maybe. But like if something went wrong on a Friday, you're not dealing with that lawyer until Monday.
Right.
And it's in 2023. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the great thing about a smart contract, right?
Exactly.
The smart contract can do exactly what you're referring to. And so if purchases can be brought on chain, certainly those things can happen through the disintermediation and removing the bank and the lawyer from the situation. Something like that could be possible.
And by the way, lawyers, like
we love you.
We do. And if you're listening, I think this is more about what could this mean for your business? For your profession. Same with the realtors. Like how might we as real estate professionals are intermediaries as well?
I mean, I got lots of things I could say, but
we'll leave that for an after hours podcast episode. Okay, Jarrett, I really appreciate you being here. I mean, there's so many things we can touch on. I'm really looking forward to our more fulsome real estate focused conversation. October 3rd to 5th. I can't remember which day we're on, but for realtors who happen to be from around here, do check out the Pacific West Conference. And otherwise, Jarrett, just remind us,
where people can find you and the things you're working on.
Yeah, thank you. So digibuddies.xyz is the NFT project or the digital collectibles we're working on. And you can find us on both Twitter and Instagram under digibuddiesxyz. And if you're interested in Web3 crypto NFT education, you can find me at the Web3 Prof, web3prof.com, and at the Web3 Prof on all of the social channels.
I'd love to see some more moms join your courses.
I would too.
And maybe some young people, maybe some seniors who are ready to plan, what their next step is.
I would absolutely love that.
Yeah, let's add some diversity to Jarrett's courses.
Come on, guys.
All right. Well, this has been super fun. I really enjoy it. I'm still learning this in-person thing, but it's been just a privilege to sit here with you. And both of our hair. It's just looking for those of you watching. Yes.
Same hair, but we're not siblings.
Yes. All right, everybody. Jarrett, thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Everybody else, thank you for tuning in. And we will see you next week on From the Blockchain.
Thanks, Ashley.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of From the Blockchain. I really hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any ideas about future episodes, including themes or potential guests, please check for a link in the show notes. Happy to hear from you. Also, if you're interested in being a potential sponsor for From the Blockchain, I'd love to hear from you as well. Check for a special link just for you in the show notes. All right, everybody. Again, thanks for being here. Love the show. Love being with you. Please remember to subscribe, review, and share with your friends. Until next week, have a great one.